Hello, my name is Eric Jackson of Changing Elements. I'm a health coach for people with environmental sensitivities, and I am a licensed acupuncturist in the state of Texas. This is a new program I'm starting, so every month I will be doing one of these informative sessions to help people understand health in the context of environmental sensitivities or share some relevant news as it pertains to this topic. So, having environmental sensitivities or any other chronic condition can certainly be challenging. Oftentimes, it's difficult for others to relate to the constraints that someone with a chronic condition might have. Sometimes, even for those who may be exposed to similar issues, won't really understand what a person who has environmental sensitivities is going through. There's a lot of information out there, and a lot of it may well be outdated or incorrect. This session is to help you more easily navigate some of the issues with regards to healthcare standards and practices so you can more quickly achieve the results that you wish, and also so that you can spare yourself some stress and hopefully save some money. That out of the way, these are 8 things you can keep in mind to help you on your healthcare journey. The very first thing is to understand that a number of the standards that one will come across are standards that are based off of emergency conditions. Um, so, one of the first things with recognizing the standards is that they are for diagnosing various conditions, and these conditions will have a number of parameters on which they're based. These parameters can be a certain demographic or a, a set scenario. For example, blood work panels give healthcare providers a snapshot of your health at that moment. This is why you're generally asked not to eat anything for a number of hours before a medical test. They don't want anything clouding the results. Um, Unfortunately, the standards on which blood work is judged are often based on the question of, does this person need to go into the ER? And they don't give a longer term picture of your health. Plenty of chronic conditions are not immediately life threatening, but that doesn't mean that you do not require treatment. A wonderful example of this would be thyroid conditions, as there are a number of values which can all be within parameters, but they don't actually mean that a person is thriving. So, for something like that, I would recommend that you have your blood work and other labs interpreted by someone with a functional medicine background, or if they're trained in functional blood chemistry, that would also be a good way to go. You may also want to look at a hair mineral analysis test to give you a picture of your health, as it shows how someone has been doing for the past 2 months or so, and is not just a how are you doing in this moment, which is what blood work tends to be based off of. The second thing to realize is that standards change. Sometimes the population sampled is in question. Rating optimal lung performance is going to look a lot different when you're looking at smokers, sedentary office workers, people who live at high altitudes, and Olympians. I certainly felt a degree of a shift in my lung ability when I was in Denver last. And here I am in Dallas. Sometimes standards shift because the population overall has become sicker, so the idea of what a healthy person is has changed. This shift can also occur because of government or corporate interference. Something to consider if you're concerned about a particular standard is try finding what the value was a decade or two or three prior and see have there been any shifts. If it was more stringent in the past, then there is a possibility that the standard was shifted just to make the numbers look better. The tolerable amount of ozone and Wi-Fi has changed over the years, and sometimes the standards change to accommodate a higher amount of pollution. But corporate practices may also quietly acknowledge this issue. When they first came out, smartphones did not have a nighttime mode, and while the companies are likely never going to state outright that their screens at highest visibility can cause issues with sleep, we have noticed now that they all seem to carry that alternative nighttime mode as part of their standard now, but can't be bothered to actually state outright that it could cause insomnia with the normal setting. So, third bit is standards are not standard. Standards are not universal. America as a country is much more willing to tolerate pollutants and toxins than many other countries. And America is far more litigious, so if there's an issue with a product that doesn't have a big company backing it, or worse, the product affects profit margins of a big company, then there may well be an effort to squash that product, even if it is generally safe. Um, that stated, there are certainly substances which do require careful attention. From my acupuncture background, there's a plant called Zi, which, if prescribed appropriately, it's very good, but it is also very toxic and is treated with quite a healthy degree of respect if you ever do end up using it. Another thing to consider, your fourth, is that medications tend to mask the problem. So, unless you're working with someone who falls under the umbrella of functional medicine or is explicitly treating the root of a condition as a holistic practitioner, then it's very likely that any medication you are given is essentially a band aid. For example, say you have a broken arm. Once it's in a cast and set properly, your arm should heal on its own in about 6 to 8 weeks. Now, you may be given a painkiller to dull any sensitivity while it heals, and that is good because it can help you sleep and rest, and that will assist in the healing process. But while that reduction in pain sensation may be good at that time, it's not doing anything to help with tissue regeneration, improve circulation, or knit the bone. It's just masking the pain. It's not actually fixing the problem. And most medications are like this. They mask the issue. They can help you function, but for something longer term, this is not a solution. Now, there are some conditions which do require long-term and possibly permanent pharmaceutical treatment, but a lot of conditions, even very complex ones, can be improved or even resolved by lifestyle adjustments and a good treatment. Healthcare providers should work to get people better, not keep them on pills and treatments indefinitely. Number 5, not all supplements are created equally. So very often, alternative practitioners will make use of supplements to address the issues of their clients. While this is all well and good, one must be aware that not all supplements are equal, which is why you may find, for example, that a magnesium supplement from a healthcare provider is going to cost more than one from your local store. This is due in part to the quality as well as type of supplement. Alternative practitioners want to make sure that the prospect of taking pills is as easy as possible, while also presenting them in a form that you would be willing to take them in. For something more acute, to take an example from my herbalist background with acupuncture, raw herbs prepared, boiled, and then drunk are more potent than a pill form, but generally this is more expensive and certainly a more time-consuming process, and most people are unwilling to work with that, so a capsule is generally a more recommended option. Even so, there is the question of quality of the herbs being used, and sometimes a dropper or syrup is substituted because the potency and digestibility will be higher. For someone who has environmental sensitivities, I would tend to recommend that they stay away from herbal compounds, as these are generally multiple substances all in one, and with the several ingredients, that means that there are now several things in one pill that could potentially be a trigger, whereas environmental sensitivities is something where you need to be very cautious about what you are intaking, and if you do have a reaction, know what it is. So go for fewer variables. Surgical implants are another thing to consider. Number 6 is that reactions to implants can occur. Surgical implants, even as minor as fillings and crowns for dental work to as major as pacemakers and replacement joints, are something to keep in mind when scouting out what might be causing certain reactions and leading to malaise, fatigue, and other conditions. Any substance that is placed in your body can lead to a reaction. And while the medical and dental establishments are much more aware of this than they were in previous decades, it is still in your best interest to see to it that you are tested appropriately for the materials, medications, and anesthetics which may be used when you have a procedure done. In the past, I haven't heard of this so much now, but you would hear of people who would go in for a knee or a hip replacement and come out, and essentially they would be in more pain than they were coming in, and quite likely it's because they were not properly tested on the material, and now they are reacting to this foreign material that is in their body. Number 7 is to realize that healthcare practitioners are human. The way our healthcare system is set up, it's very difficult to get good care as someone with a chronic condition. Sorry, I had to pause it there for a second. There was some background chatter. Um, yes, it can be difficult for someone with a chronic condition to get good healthcare, or indeed anyone to get good healthcare. Even outside of hospitals, healthcare workers are shouldering the stress of many people who are generally having a pretty bad day. These healthcare workers are constantly striving to do their best with very complex and changing issues at the same time. Insurance companies are often unwilling to pay, especially for more esoteric or um, experimental ideas, but even some of the more established stuff, they just don't want to do it. And that can lead to the healthcare provider feeling very undervalued by others and societies, sometimes even those that they are working so hard to assist. Beyond that, there are significant liabilities for people in healthcare, even before the politicization of their work with the latest health crises. And they are going to have individual difficulties as well, just like everybody else in the workforce. And finally, many people just simply cannot afford healthcare, and providers can only bring down their fees so far. This is a system where the people who are trying to aid those who need their help the most tend to be frustrated and spent, and they're dealing with multiple issues from many fronts, and there are only so many leaks in the dam that a healthcare provider can plug. So we are all of us human, and we all can be looking out for each other. And this leads into my eighth point. Healthcare workers need reminders. With all those frustrating factors, it's best to keep in mind that if you suspect your healthcare provider may not have considered something with your condition as thoroughly as they should, a gentle reminder might be in order. If you come in and seem to be in reasonably decent health, the healthcare provider may not want to sign off on more tests because, in their mind, you might not need them really, and why give you another expense which might be difficult for you to afford anyway. If there's an issue which has been going on for some time, or you have a family history, do make sure to emphasize these factors if the healthcare provider does not seem so concerned about it. My example of this was a friend, a lady in her mid 20s, who had some mild hip pain, and she really didn't look to be in a bad way. So it's like, well, okay, yeah, you've got some hip pain, but you're in your mid 20s. You should mend pretty quickly. This doesn't seem to be a big issue. And then she mentioned that this was a issue that had been going on for 3 months, and the women in her family had a history of hip replacements. And then suddenly she becomes a candidate for an MRI or X-rays. So do keep that in mind. And as a bonus, we have another one that is a little more personal to me. Alternative practitioners can get lost in the weeds. So I've been somewhat critical on standard medical care, as probably every alternative practitioner is, but for every finger that one points out at someone else, there's at least one pointing back at you. So, alternative practitioners like myself are not without our faults. Many of the studies which alternative practitioners use to promote their claims are not as well developed as they ought to be, or are not that well regulated. Sometimes this is due to a difference in standards between the US and other countries because, well, standards are not standard. Other times, corporations will skew results, and sometimes we look at the results of one study and go much too far with our view on the implications of those results. Something which I feel many acupuncturists in particular are guilty of is getting too deep into smaller systems. There are so many subsystems of acupuncture that effectively everywhere on the body is an acupuncture point in some system. And that undermines the idea that there is anything unique about a particular acupuncture treatment. Likewise, treating conditions of internal organs based on points on the foot, ear, or hand becomes far more suspect when there are several systems for doing that and these systems do not all agree with each other. Acupuncturists are taught to diagnose based on tongue and pulse qualities, and while there is something to these methods, they again are not consistent with more grounded findings. You could easily end up going to different acupuncturists making different diagnoses for the same condition, and they're not all going to agree with each other. And while I think you would get some degree of that with conventional medical professionals, I also believe that such variance needs to be viewed with a grain of salt. Another issue is that sometimes the language that alternative healthcare practitioners use for diagnosis can sound quite alien to someone who hasn't trained in it, including other healthcare providers. With acupuncturists, you'll have normally Chinese names of herbs and herbal formulas, which that's how acupuncturists studied. And their language for diagnostics can be very poetic and is very different from anything that a conventional practitioner would use and requires a degree of explanation and translation. So that is another thing that must be addressed. Both standard and alternative practitioners can be critical of each other because each will often see the people that the other failed to treat very well. Standard treatments tend to mask the problem and not address the root cause of things, while alternative treatments may simply be ineffective. So those are my 8, and I think one bonus secrets for addressing healthcare concerns. Hopefully, you found some ideas in this discussion beneficial when approaching your own healthcare journey. Until next time, I'm Eric Jackson with Changing Elements, and I wish you all a good day.